This is the third module of the Western Mystery Tradition, Medieval and Modern. We're laying some of the foundation to understand what really went on in the medieval period, the Renaissance, and what went on in the later Rosicrucian and other schools, by getting a better understanding of what's going on with astrology and the concept of Macrocosm and the relationship to Kabbalah, which was very important in the early period. So what I'm going to do now is show you a little video, in order to do that, I'm going to turn this.
Before the art of astrology was developed, ancient people relied on a basic knowledge of the stars and planets for their very survival. Many sites around the world speak of astrology's earliest beginnings.
The origins of astrology might even go back more than 20,000 years into the Paleolithic, because there are carvings on bones and other objects that indicate perhaps early interest in lunar tallies, the motions of the moon.
The astrology practiced today was born over 4,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, now modern-day Iraq. Ancient civilizations in the region created some of the world's first cities and developed early agriculture. They were also among the first to turn skywatching into a codified system of astrology, a method which remains basically unchanged even now. The Babylonian system of astrology might have been lost forever if Alexander the Great had not taken its study back to Greece after his conquest of Mesopotamia.
When Alexander the Great invaded the East in 331 BC, this was a momentous event because he introduced Babylonian astrology to the Greeks, and Greek mathematics and observational astronomy to the Babylonians. And the result was basically what we know today as astrology.
Babylonian priests saw astrology as the works of the gods. Later, Greek philosophers applied astrology to reveal individual character and personality. By the dawn of Christianity, the Roman Empire had succeeded the Greek and inherited its passion for astrology. As the Romans marched through Europe, astrology went with them. While a fascination with astrology thrived in Europe, other cultures around the world also studied the prophetic patterns of the stars. Chinese scholars devised an elaborate form of astrology based on associating each year with a particular animal. Constellation charts kept by stargazers for Chinese emperors are some of the earliest astrological artifacts ever discovered. On the other side of the world, the ancient Maya of Mexico and Guatemala created an elaborate calendar with incredible accuracy.
The ancient Maya developed probably the world's most elaborate astronomical and calendrical system. The day that you were born in the Maya 260-day calendar contained your fortune, contained your fate for the rest of your life, and you took part of your name from the day that you were born in this calendar.
Now let's take a look at the real sky, the starry sky, and the zodiac and the planets, and see what they look like in motion. What you see up here on the screen is a CCD picture, a high sensitivity picture of the starry sky. You would not be able to see this with your eyes, although if you did live in ancient Babylon or Egypt or Palestine, where the air was really clear, you would see much more than you do today. This up here that looks like a cloud is the edge of the galaxy, what we call our home galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. But the stars don't just sit in as though they were fixed and not moving, because the Earth is rotating from west to east, and therefore things rise at the east and set in the west. So what I want you to do is take a look at a full night of stop-time photography using a wide-angle lens so that you can see what actually happens in one night if you were watching the stars in one night. Now, this photography you're going to see is with wide-angle lens that's really kind of a fisheye lens, so that the stars will rise in the east and they will sink in the west, but the east and the west will seem to be all squished together, so they'll be coming up in one place and going back down another place very close to it. But in real life it would be over on the eastern side of the sky all the way to the western side. So let's take a look at what this is like. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to point out to you about the little video we just saw. Whether Alexander the Great came to Persia or not, astrology would have continued very well and very strong in what we call India today, because it was in India that what we today call Vedic astrology or Jyotish developed. But the astrology that was taken back to the Greek culture through the conquest that was made and the Hellenization of things, creating the Hellenistic civilization, the Hellenistic period, was combined with some of the observational techniques of the Greek philosophers to develop a form of astrology in the Holy Land and in Rome and Greece and so on, previous to the time of the life of Yeshua, of Jesus. And at the time of Jesus, it was a very, very strong and important thing. We find even in the legends of the New Testament the stories of the Magi seeing his star in the sky and all this sort of thing, which are probably legends. But it's a very important thing to understand a lot of the thought of the period, especially the Kabbalistic thought, Jewish Kabbalistic thought that existed at that time that was not written down, but was written down later. Now, the fact that this developed in the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates River has to do with the fact that those rivers flood every year, and they bring a whole lot of wet black goo down and flood for miles out, and then the water recedes, and then people can farm that land. Now, you know, when people came here to the Midwest, and they farmed the Midwest for 30 years and robbed the soil of all its nutrients, and turned into a dust bowl. But in Egypt, with the Nile River and in the Tigris Euphrates, it was a self-fertilizing river, because every year it would come and flood, and then it would recede and leave all this beautiful humus and everything else so that you could grow. And so these civilizations were able to live in one place instead of being nomadic. Not only could they grow, but that stuff also gave them building stuff to make bricks that they could bake in the sun. They built a lot of the first great structures were built with these mud-dried bricks. Later on in Egypt, the idea of actually cutting stone and granite was developed, and then we got the first stonemasons and all this sort of thing. But so the reason that was important is that people had to know when that was going to happen, and so there were people who were in charge of figuring out when that would happen. In Egypt, it was known it would happen when the very bright star known as Sirius would be finally visible on the horizon after the sunset. There were many other kinds of observations that were made that were calendric for people to find out about when they could do stuff and what they could do. So what I want to do is I want to orientate you now to the basics of the astronomical parts of astrology so we can understand what we're talking about. And the main thing I want to just make sure we understand is the ecliptic. Here you see a nice little bunch of shots of the night sky, and you can see that the stars are slowly migrating across the sky. If you sit and watch the sky move, the sky will move across your field of view very slowly. You can't see it moving, but if you come out an hour later, everything will have moved over. Now, the sky therefore appears to revolve around the Earth, but the stars seem to be fixed into patterns, so they stay in their patterns all the time. And we can map these fixed stars that seem to revolve from the east to the west. It seems the sky moves from the east and slowly rolls around like this to the west, all the different constellations and everything. However, when we do that, where different systems of constellations have been used for navigation, for other kinds of things by people, let me ask you a question. Why does the sky seem to roll around from east to the west? Why is that?
Because the Earth was rotating
from west to east. So we're moving this way, and that makes the sky seem to roll around us. So from a geocentric point of view, we're in the center of the universe, and the sky is moving. But there are planets that move slowly through these fixed stars. I'm just showing a little map of the fixed stars. Night after night, if you look at the moon is in a little different place. It rises a little later each night, almost an hour later each night. So it'll be in a different constellation each night. It's slowly moving backwards against this direction that all the sky is moving. It's moving against that motion. And here's this orbiting backwards against the rotation of the stars is what really defines what the ancients thought of as the light that we call planets, from the Greek word planeo, which means to wander, because they're not keeping their right places. This is Jupiter and Saturn over 11 months photographed against the background of the sky. That's the Pleiades up here, and here's Jupiter and here's Saturn, and they seem to be moving slowly over a period of about 11 months, and then they come to a standstill, and then they slowly go backwards, called retrogressing. And so the ancients thought that these planets had those motions in themselves. They didn't realize it was just from the perspective of the Earth that they seem to be going backwards. And they all travel in a very narrow band, which we call the ecliptic. Modern astronomy shows us that all planets orbit the sun in the same plane and the same direction, like this. So if we're on a planet here and we're looking out in the sky, there's just one little path in the sky that we'll see all the other planets moving. The stars will be all around. So that little path that all the planets move, the sun, the moon, and all the planets move through, is what we call the ecliptic. And the Earth's moon also orbits in that same plane and direction. Now, we have the name that we use is the ecliptic. The ancients had many other names, the royal road, the royal path of heaven. And they divided the constellations in the ecliptic, the stars that were in that ecliptic, up into 12 equal divisions so they could map where the planets were at any particular time. Now, to us, the plane of the ecliptic, as things rise from the east, the plane of the ecliptic is not straight overhead. It is actually sort of south of us like this, because we're up from the equator. If we're on the equator, it would be right over us. But it's down that direction just as many degrees as we are this direction, which happens to be about latitude 38. Not only do the planets seem to move along this road in the ecliptic itself, but they move a little farther apart. They don't travel in exactly the same line. They can be this far out, this far out, this far out, and it changes all the time. Things wobble around a little bit. So the ecliptic is defined by the path of the sun as we see it from the Earth. And that's what this line is we call the ecliptic. Okay, that's going to define the zodiac. And the zodiac is the places in the sky where the different planets are. They've always been divided into 12 signs, not 10, not 4, not 3, but always 12. The Babylonian system divided it that way, but it was divided in other ways. The moon waxes and wanes over 28 days. Takes 2 weeks for it to get to be a full moon, 2 weeks to be a new moon, 1 week to be a quarter, to look like half a moon. It's actually what we call the first quarter. That's how we get our system of days, 7 days a week. So 7 days a week, 12 signs, things like this were used to make calendric calculations. Now the symbols of the zodiac we need to know for later when we do more stuff with with alchemy and things like this, and Western medicine and things that were established on the basis of astrology and astrological symbols. Each of these 12 divisions of the zodiac has a sign, a glyph you're very familiar with, but it's very ancient. You'll find them in ancient Greek manuscripts. You find them in many other manuscripts. They're the same. And this wheel of the zodiac seems to turn like this and rise from the east over here, turn around. And so the entire zodiacal circle seems to turn once every 24 hours. But since we're going around the sun, what's up in the sky at nighttime is going to be different when we're on this side of the sun than when we're on this side of the sun. So in one full year, you'll get to see the whole zodiac at nighttime. You can't see it at daytime because the sun's light blocks out the stars. So the zodiac rises in the east and revolves about 180 degrees in 12 hours over the night. So here's a little picture of what the sky looks like moving around. The one fixed star we have at this time, Polaris, which has changed. We've had different pole stars before. This is the edge of the galaxy going around. And this is the east. This is what we call the ascendant. This is what things rise up. And if you look in the east, you'll see them rising up from here. It's a very important place in horoscopes. This is the direction that it moves. Now there are symbols for the planets that we should review. This is a very universal symbol for the sun, a circle with a dot. This is for Venus. You know, this is the female sign. This is for Mars, the male sign. This is for Mercury, who is known as Hermes to the Greeks, and Hermes Trismegistus. When we study the Hermetic mysteries, this is a very important planet. Jupiter looks like a big 4. The moon looks like a little crescent on an outhouse, and Saturn looks like an H. So those are symbols we'll run into as we're looking at some things in astrology. Now, the ancient Greeks were scientists, and they wanted to figure out why things were the way they were. Everybody thought, for example, that clouds were made out of smoke. Some of the early philosophers said, well, let's go out and actually find out what they're made out of. One of them was decided he would go up into the mountains where the clouds were, because his theory was that the clouds were water. So he took sheepskin with him up and climbed up into the mountains, into the clouds, and when he came back, it was all full of water. And so he decided that these clouds were the basic element out of which all things were made. Now, when the Greek philosophers spoke of elements, they were speaking of energy. When they spoke of fire, they spoke of something not just physical fire. When they spoke of water, they spoke of an energy. And they argued a bit about whether the primordial energies were fire-like or water-like. But they didn't argue about what the universe was shaped like, what the macrocosm was shaped like. And cosmology developed from Anaximander through Empedocles and all kinds of people, leading to this concept of what would be used in alchemy as the generation of the cosmos. The cosmos was thought of to be a cylinder, which would account for this rotation around like this. And this is the basic idea. Here is a cylinder of everything. And the Stoics said, well, originally everything was chaotic, going in all kinds of directions, but finally, after long, long amounts of time, everything was going in the same direction, and that's what creates this cylinder effect. And as it rotates, if we look at a cross-section of the cylinder, as the cylinder rotates in this direction, it separates from the primal materia, the primal substance which contains all forms in it. It begins to separate out the earth element from the water element, from the air element, if you're going from the most gross to the least gross, the most dense to the least dense, to finally the fire, which is on the outside, the very farthest expanse of all this. Now, as this great cylinder rotates, the cycles produce manifestation and differentiation, because all kinds of combinations of air, earth, fire, and water are formed. And remember, these are energies. These are not just what we think of as air, earth, fire, and water. As this motion continues, the earth precipitates in the center, waters are upon the surface of the earth, and then we have air, which is less dense, and then we have the fire at the extremes in the empyrean. And then we have these clouds, not clouds like we were talking about, clouds made out of water, clouds that are very high up in the universe so far that we can't even think of what they would be like, and they obscure the fire. And the clouds that obscure the fire create what we see as stars and sun. So all the stars and the sun are really manifestations of a universal fire that's out very, very far in space. And that is the divine world. That is the world of God and the gods, is fire. So the cycles then produce differentiation in air and earth and fire and water, as well as combinations of them. And a later concept that came in was the concept of the quintessence, or the fifth element, the ether or ether, the element that souls are made of. In Vedic astrology, it's called Akash. So as the cycles go round and round and round, minerals are generated and they grow in the earth. Eventually plants grow from the earth and are separated. There's so much air, so much fire, so much water, but mostly earth. Spiders and bugs and animals and creatures are created out of earth mostly, but of the other elements as well. They have a little spark of fire and different things like that. And then the waters produce fish, and the air produces birds. And finally, humanity, human beings, are alchemical combinations of all these forms that have gone through transmigration, through the transmigration of the soul. So a human being is made up of earlier souls of mineral things and vegetable things and animal things. And Pythagoras taught, as did also the Hindus, that it was the transmigration, that we had all come up through many different soul forms and we had accumulated them and brought them together. Now, the most important concept to understand is the concept that we find in that Plato talks about. Plato is the student of Socrates. Socrates never wrote anything. Plato remembered Socrates' dialogues with students later and wrote them down. And he remembers a dialogue that Socrates had with a man named Timaeus, who was an Egyptian priest. And the Timaeus tells us the same thing later in the Mysteries of Hermes Trismegistus. In the Corpus Hermeticum, there is a tractate called the Macrocosm, which tells us the same thing. And this is the concept and understanding of what I'm now going to explain to you is the microcosm. You see, the macrocosm is this whole universe we're talking about, how it's formed. The microcosm is what exists in every soul, every human soul. Not other souls, but human souls, because human souls are the complete. They've gone through all the transmigration, so they have everything in them. Plato referred to the universe as the Son of God. The universe, the great macrocosm, was the Son of God. And so then how do we all play into that? Well, this is the story he tells, and you'd have to read the whole thing. He says, in the beginning, the demiurge, the creator, took the basic substance of all things, and he formed it into a cross or a chi, and then he bent it over so the ends touched. Now you have two hoops, and one is spinning in one direction, one's going to the right. That is the way of the philosopher, the way of unity. It's called the mean, or the same, unity. And the other one goes to the left, and the one that goes to the left is the way of diversity. And the way of diversity is to leave unity and to leave the divine consciousness and to go back into incarnate consciousness and diversity of different forms. So in these two motions, what formed were then 7 planetary rulers along this way. These planetary rulers are called Hymarmene, which means fate, destiny. They rule what goes on here on Earth, which is at the center. And then there were the fixed stars, the zodiac all around, and each one contained a soul, a suke, a psyche. And they were intelligences, they were mind. And so as this whole kind of a macrocosm was created, we had the way, this two directions, the way of the right and the way of the left, the direction, the motion of the right, the motion of the left. And then we have the psyche, the souls. Now, there are different explanations for the fall of the soul into incarnation. The one that the Macrocosm gives is that the stars, the fixed stars, are supposed to stay fixed, but they didn't. They didn't follow their paths, so they had to be further purified. So therefore, they had to be incarnated through all this and go down onto Earth to have their imperfections taken out before they could be reunited with their divine light in the sky. So the idea is that these intelligences, or souls, had to be purified. And that's the basic concept of what human beings are. We're here because there's something wrong with us. We are damaged goods. We're not pure yet. We need to get pure. And so in order to do that, we have to become incarnate. We have to become incarnated beings. And so we descend through all these spheres and live a life on the earth. And if the life we live on the earth, says Plato, the first and best incarnation is to be a man, if you're a human. If you screw that up, you come back as a woman. I'm just quoting Plato, you know. And then if you screw that up, you come back as a pig or some other kind of thing, like you know. Anyway, there were a lot of very bizarre ideas about this sort of thing. But I wanted to get the basic concept. The microcosm, the most important thing is the soul is a replica of the macrocosm. It has everything in it that the macrocosm has, and therefore these things are like little harp strings that you will pick up the patterns that are in these things when you're incarnate. When you are incarnate in your life. So as you come down through the 7 planetary rulers, whatever positions they happen to be in, and there's billions of possible combinations, will be picked up by your soul as it comes down, and that will be your ethos. That will be who you are. So we have various stories of the fall of primordial humanity from the macrocosm state and the development of microcosms. We have the Adam and Eve story, and in that story, Adam is originally androgynous. He's male and female, and then God takes his rib out and divides him into a woman and man. And the woman, of course, causes him to screw up, and so they're ejected from the Garden of Eden. The ancient rabbis did not interpret that the way Protestants do. They interpreted the taking upon Adam and Eve of coats of flesh, or of coats of skin, as an allegory for incarnation, becoming incarnate. So paradise is not a place on the earth. You can't go anywhere and find it. It's a place from which we've fallen. In the Kabbalistic interpretation, Adam becomes Adam Kadmon. And Adam Kadmon is a primordial human that is the Son of God, and he's perfect. But he's in need of some kind of purification, apparently, and there are different explanations of why it forms. But all humanity comes from this original human, Adam Kadmon. And Adam Kadmon now is brought into incarnation, and all humanity is ultimately one, but it then comes and is broken up into lots and lots of little pieces. And in the Greek stories of Hermes Trismegistus, the primordial human, or the primordial humanity, is called the anthropos. And in this, the anthropos bends down through the spheres in order to explore the world that has been created, and he sees his own reflection in the water, in the earth, which is it's a variation on the myth of Narcissus, who falls in love with his own reflection. But the minute that he's bent down through the spheres, he's trapped. He's trapped in incarnation because of desire, and so on. And so he now the one human is divided into male and female sexes, and blah blah blah, and all this sort of thing. All the differentiation goes on as the turning of the spheres continues and time passes. So the descent of your microcosmic soul for incarnation and birth happens in this way. Here we have these different realms, these powers, principalities, authorities, as Paul calls them in the Bible. And they're ruled by different deities represented by the planets. We have up here Kronos, Saturn, Jupiter, Zeus, and so on. This is Apollo, the sun. He's the fourth one out because that's the speed of his rotation. It's assumed that the sun goes around the earth. And Venus, or Aphrodite, and Mercury, and finally the moon. So what occurs is that your microcosm, which is you've got everything in you that the great universe has. It's otherwise known as the imago Dei, the image of God, which is what you are, is taken down and squeezed in through this little filter, and then you become an individualized being. And you have your own horoscope for example. And this horoscope represents what planets are in what relationship to each other and all this sort of thing at the moment of you take your first breath. Because in the system of the horoscope is when you're born, when you breathe, that's when the spirit that actually comes into your body. That's when this becomes incarnate. And this is called the sidereal body, or the astral body, or the astral ethos. The word ethos means something like personality. The Hebrews called it the nephesh. It's not permanent. It only lives. You're only this way as long as you're incarnate. And after you die, you'll get a new ethos. You'll get a new personality, maybe a new sex, and all kinds of different things. So after death, what happens? Well, here we've got our spheres. I'm going to just use the planetary symbols, but right here for Venus, I'm going to put the goddess, Venus, Aphrodite here. And so let's build our little spheres that you're going to have to be released from in order to get out of here. Okay, you die. So your soul ascends back to where it came from, the fire in the sky, to the divine fire. But what happens? Turns out there was part of you that was not that had a problem. You have an issue with your Venus stuff. You couldn't keep your hands off of other people's wives or something, whatever it might be, this sort of thing. So what happens is, at this point, you don't pass. Now, among the ancient Egyptians, in the books of the dead, people were taught passwords to say when they got to the different places so they could get through. And I am Osiris, I am Horus, I am a son of Osiris, etc. Magical incantations and things, but they don't work. They don't really work here. You have to actually have that whole issue solved before you can get beyond this. So what happens is, I'm sorry, you've got to be reincarnated, and you go into reincarnation. And it's because of you haven't got those issues dealt with, you have to be reincarnated. Until all of it's been taken care of, you can't get out of here. When you got it all done, then you can ascend. So the job in the ancient theory, and it goes through all the lines of all the mystery schools, and it goes through. You'll find the same kind of thing in Hinduism and other things like this. Is that the point of life on Earth is to perfect our souls, to become teleos, as the Master Jesus said. When we finally do that, we can return to that eighth heaven, the place of the starry skies, the fire, which is known as the OGDOAD, the eighth heaven, and that is where the risen and ascended beings live. Now, communication with that higher world is something that is a major theme throughout, starting with Pythagoras and going out throughout the Western mystery tradition. To get in contact with your, sometimes it's called your holy guardian angel or your higher self or different things. In the Shepherd of Hermes, Poimandres, the shepherd of men, is the one who is represented by your own higher nature. It is also called the Algoides, the higher self, the golden self. And Christian saints were considered to be a communio sanctorum, a communion of people that could be addressed who had overcome everything and they were out of it, but they cared about you, much as a bodhisattva would, and that they would try to help you get out of this situation as well. So here's what it would look like, for example, for Hermetic initiation. When a person had studied for years and years with a Hermes, with a teacher in the Hermetic tradition, he would have become an expert on astrology and geomancy and mathematics and music and a whole lot of other kinds of things. Because their approach to doing this was they had to perfect everything, including their minds. And they started out in classes of 20 or 30 people, and finally down to classes of 3, and then the final initiation many years later for the few that were considered to get there was 1-to-1. And I translated the Hermetic initiation document for my dissertation, which is also online. This is the kind of world that is understood. This is what the macrocosm and microcosm relationship is. We have a world of 4 elemental realms. We have Earth, that's the symbol for Earth. It's the downturned triangle with a line through it, which means it's the most dense form. Water, which is a downturned triangle with no line through it. air, which is the upturned triangle with a line, and fire, which is the upturned triangle with no line. It's in order of density. There's actually a fifth element. And we have the spheres above us. And here I'm putting cute little different God symbols. I find these on the internet. They're wonderful, aren't they? They have both the astrological symbols and they have little pictures of God-type people. But they're not friendly little gods. They're called daimonium. They're called, well, the word demon didn't mean devils back in this age. It meant little gods or godlets. But Socrates, for example, had a demon. It was called the daimon of Socrates, which was his conscience. It was one of the first literary descriptions we have of human conscience. Socrates told him, had a little demon in his head, a little voice, a little god that spoke to him. It never told him what to do, it just told him, warned him what not to do. And that was called synedesis, which is conscience. And that developed rather late in humanity. We don't find any descriptions of conscience 2,000, 3,000 years ago, or 4,000, but we do find it at the time of Socrates. But these are now guardians of the soul, of the macrocosm. So what happens when a person has gone through all the training to perfect the soul in the Hermetic Mystery School? His goal is to make contact with the OGDOAD, the eighth heaven, to be there, to actually exist there. Now, that is something like the Gnostic concept and probably the Messianic early Christian concept of the kingdom of God, the rulership of God, which Jesus says is spread out on the earth all around us, but people don't see it. And in order to make that kind of connection with the higher world and the abode of the ascended saints, you had finally gone through all the education and finally took the final initiation by a Hermetic master, and this might have taken 20 years of your life to do. And the Hermetic master would take you to the eighth. He would show you how to get there, and you would experience it yourself. But you wouldn't have to die to do it. You didn't have to, your body didn't have to die. You went in consciousness to this place and experienced it. And then you lived on the earth and took that consciousness with you. So you were living in the OGDOAD while you were on the earth. It's like being in the kingdom of heaven while still being on the earth. And you then had become what was called teleos. You were perfect. Remember, Yeshua was always telling people, be ye teleos. Be perfect. Be perfected. It's a term from the mystery cults, mystery religions. So this is the idea of how individual initiation and training in the Western mystery tradition would prepare people for perfection of the human soul. And that would give you then the communion and guidance, in this case, of the Hermetic saints, but it would give you other kinds of guidance and communion in different traditions. So this is a basic pattern. This is the relationship with the microcosm, which is what your soul is in this particular incarnation. That's the flavor soul you have. You're male and you have a tendency to put on weight and that kind of stuff, and you have certain things you have to deal with and you have to get them done before you die, hopefully, and all that sort of thing. So that is the concept of this. Now, so we've seen what the astronomical background is, the astrological background. So what happened? Well, this